extensive Washington career well before that. She worked on Capitol Hill, worked for Eastman Kodak, worked with AT&T. She's been a real force in a series of successful trade legislation initiatives, the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, the Omnibus Trade and Competitiveness Act of 1988, my own personal favorite. And she really has become quite an expert in the past and now on the high-skilled immigration. I was going to ask her to speak particularly to that piece of the Startup Act. To my further left and your further right, we're delighted to have Audrey Singer join us, who's a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. She's part of the Metropolitan Policy Program, which does a lot of work, not only on, you might say, metropolitan clusters, but really the broader question of competitiveness as well, of which clearly immigration and talent and so forth are key pieces. She is a distinguished demographer. She brings some real expertise to this question. She has published widely in a whole series of scholarly journals, and most recently is the co-editor of 21st Century Gateways, Immigrant Incorporation in Suburban America. So I confess I have not read, but it is now high on my must-read list. And we are delighted also to welcome Toby Smith. Toby is currently the Vice President for Policy at the Association of American Universities. These are the major many of the Tier 1 research universities in the country, and he speaks with an authoritative voice on their interest in R&D and so forth. Toby also worked on Capitol Hill at one time. Three people here showing there is life after Capitol Hill. He worked at the Washington office of MIT, and then was the Director of Federal Relations on Research for the University of Michigan. He is also the author of a recent book, Beyond Sputnik, U.S. Science Policy in the 21st Century. So I just want to make a plug for these two authors that we are in that gift-giving season, and what mother wouldn't want to have one, if not both of these volumes? I've asked the panelists then to talk about different aspects of the Act, and they'll make some brief remarks, and then we'll move on to questions. Paula, let me start with you on the sort of question of what Senator Warner referred to as kind of an H-1B plus 50,000 new immigrants idea.
Well, thank you, Ken. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. Yes, I want to talk about the part of the bill, Section 8, which provides conditional permanent resident status for up to 50,000 foreign nationals a year who have earned an advanced degree from a U.S. university in a STEM field, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, giving them the opportunity to stay in the United States and put their skills to work and possibly even launch businesses and create new jobs as part of new businesses. I think the bill is important for, and that particular piece of it is important for three reasons. One, it places the discussion about high-skilled immigration into the appropriate light of economic growth and job creation, not about immigration, but about economics. Second, the bill draws attention to the need for the U.S. to tap one of its greatest assets for economic growth, and that is the number of incredibly smart and talented people that are coming out of U.S. universities who have come to the United States to get the best education the world has to offer. And third, the fact that the bill is a bipartisan solution to a national need, and we heard a little bit about that at the end of their discussion. So on the first issue about putting the debate on high-skilled immigration into the appropriate light of economic growth and job creation, the senators rightly refer to this as visa reform as an issue of competitiveness and innovation and not about exclusion or numbers. It's not about borders, it's about economic benefit, and it's economic benefit for the United States. I'm going to give you some statistics that I think help bear this out. There have been so many reports that have been written over the last decade or so on high-skilled immigration, and I've collected a few of the things here that I think help to draw that point significantly. In the last 15 years, immigrants have started over 25% of U.S. venture-backed public companies. 25% of all engineering and technology companies established in the U.S. between 1995 and 2005 had at least one immigrant key founder. And we heard Senator Warner talk about what's been going on in Virginia. Together, this pool of immigrant-founded companies was responsible for generating more than $52 billion in sales in 2005 and creating just under 450,000 jobs. Now, I'm not saying that every foreign grad student with an advanced degree in STEM is going to be an entrepreneur and start a successful company. But what we do know is that successful immigrant entrepreneurs who have come to the United States, of them, 52% came originally to study. And they're a good pool of people on which to bet. Immigrants are 30% more likely to form new businesses than U.S.-born citizens. We can look at iconic companies like Yahoo and Intel and Google and eBay, all large employers which were founded at least in part by foreign nationals, and see that they have greatly benefited the United States. But that just is the tip of the iceberg. Many of the startups, the small businesses that we know create so many of the new jobs in the country are founded by immigrants. And this is not a new phenomenon. This is part of America's heritage. 40% of the Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or their children. Now, from an innovation standpoint, this is equally compelling, not just the economic benefit. Foreign nationals residing in the U.S. were named as inventors or co-inventors in 25% of the international patent applications filed in the U.S. in 2006. That's an increase of over 15% since 1998. And the evidence shows that foreign-born advanced degree graduates are 3 times more likely to file patents than U.S.-born workers. Again, it's a specialized group of people. They're not better than Americans or anything like that, but this group of people bring an awful lot to this country that we can tap. Second, the bill draws attention to the need to tap one of the greatest assets of economic growth, these incredibly smart people who have come to the United States. They are by nature ambitious, and they are risk takers. Otherwise, they would not have come and spent so much of their time here in the U.S. In 2009, foreign-born students earned over 13,000 PhDs and 36,000 master's degrees from U.S. universities in all science and engineering fields, and that includes the social sciences. That represents about 1/3 of the doctorates and about 1/4 of the master's degrees. But in various fields, the concentration of foreign nationals is much higher. In electrical engineering, which is an area that Texas Instruments recruits highly from in U.S. universities, 55% of the master's degrees were awarded to foreign nationals and 63% of the PhDs. And these numbers are similarly high for other physical sciences such as physics and other engineering degrees. U.S. companies need these grads. The U.S. companies need to be able to do what they have been doing for the last, since they started, for generation after generation, which is to hire at U.S. universities. If more than half of the pool from which you recruit is foreign nationals, we have to be able to get those graduates, and we're at a disadvantage if we can't. And as the senators were talking about, our ability to hire and retain these students, or our inability to, can lead to 2 unfortunate consequences. One is that foreign competition hires them, and 2, we hire them to work for us overseas. U.S. companies, through their tax dollars, and Toby and I work a lot on funding for basic research, tax dollars that goes into university research, plus contributions from U.S. companies to universities being done on cutting-edge work. A lot of that work is being done by grad students. I can tell you from Texas Instruments standpoint, a lot of the dollars we put into universities is to train the workers so that we can hire them when they come out. If we can't hire them, all that the investment in human capital is lost to us, and our foreign competitors can hire them, and they are the winners. Or, as the senators were saying, if these individuals decide to go back to their home countries, and that's increasingly a more compelling option as countries like India and China and others have much more vibrant economies with much more opportunity, then those jobs go there. And we lose the benefit not in terms of them, the ecosystem around them from what they create, but also all their spending here in the U.S. They're not buying a house. They're not buying a car. They're not going to the dry cleaners. They're not going out to dinner. All those things get lost if they leave us. Finally, the bill is a bipartisan solution to a national need. And as I mentioned, there have been so many studies that have been written over the years that by Brookings, by PCAST, the gathering, Rising Above the Gathering Storm and its offspring that have been published. The President's Council on Jobs. All of these studies call for high-skilled immigration reform. Yet there's inertia. It's complicated, sometimes controversial, and congressional responses, for the most part, have not been bipartisan. I think that this bill helps create that momentum and bridge that gap to say this is a national problem, this is a national issue that needs to be addressed, and it should be done on a bipartisan basis. On that note, I'd like to close by adding that there may be some light at the end of the tunnel on some high-skilled immigration. The per-country limit bill that passed the House recently, the Fairness for High-Skilled Immigration, passed by an overwhelming margin. And that bill would eliminate the 7% per country cap on employment-based green cards in an incremental step over a 3-year period. And it basically provides those employees who are from high-demand countries, China, India, others, who have longer wait times to get their green cards. It helps rejigger the system so that they can get their green cards a little bit faster. The bill is pending in the Senate. It does not involve any new numbers of green cards, but it would provide a very pragmatic and helpful solution to addressing the huge backlog of people who are waiting for those green cards. And so we're hopeful something like that could get passed, hopefully this year. But I think what the senators have put out there is very pragmatic. It creates momentum, and we're very glad to be supportive of that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula, very much. Audrey, let's turn to you. I'd ask Audrey in particular to say a word or two about the Invest to Immigrate. The difference in the Startup Act is that there's a STEM requirement that goes with it, but as a long-time authority on immigration and immigration reform, you might comment on the optimism that both Senator Moran and Warner expressed in terms of perhaps having a step-by-step approach to immigration reform rather than, as Senator Moran put it, doing the whole piece at once.
Thanks, Kent. Thanks for inviting me today to talk about this important step forward and topic. The U.S. is facing slow job growth, as we all know, and the latest BLS employment report shows a slowing of the pace relative to the gains of the last 6 months. Most of the recent drop in job growth was a result of slower rates of net hiring in the private sector, and U.S. leaders, including Senators Moran and Warner, are turning towards the idea that the creation of new firms will spur new, potentially fast-growing businesses. So in the Startup Act, as they explained, they would create an entrepreneur's visa. It's a visa we currently do not have. We don't have a visa that allows people to come in or adjust their status among people who are living here if they start a new firm. So this entrepreneur visa would be for current H-1B visa holders or those who have completed graduate-level work in a STEM field, up to 75,000 immigrant entrepreneurs per year who start a business and in the first year hire at least 2 employees with an investment of $100,000 would allow the immigrant to remain in the U.S. with a conditional status for 3 additional years, during which they must employ at least 5 people who are not family members. And after that period, they could petition to have their conditional status removed, and they would be eligible for legal permanent residency or green card. So one question is, how would this visa compare to those that are already on the books? Many of you know that we have lots of different ways that immigrants come into this country. And we have various employment-based visas. In total, about 140,000 permanent worker visas are available annually to immigrants. So those are legal permanent residency. And these are about 16% of all green cards in a year. The majority go to family members of various people in the U.S. under a preference system. Some other percentage of green cards go to refugees and asylum seekers. But this 140,000 visas per year, actually only about half of that 16% go to the actual primary applicant, the worker, and the rest go to their family. So there's a small number of visas each year that go to people who are planning to work in this country or who are adjusting their status to work. Real briefly, I'll go through those types. And again, it's a preference system. The EB1 is reserved for people of extraordinary ability, and it spans arts, sciences, education, business, athletics. These are the Nobel Prize winners, Oscar winners, well-regarded professors, professional athletes, high-level managers and executives. About 20 to 30% of those employment-based visas go to this category. The second is the EB2, and this is reserved for people who are members of the professions holding advanced degrees or persons with exceptional ability. And again, it can be in the arts, science, or business. The difference between these two, the second one that I mentioned requires labor certification. The Department of Labor needs to certify that there are insufficient U.S. workers to fill this position at the prevailing wage, and that the hire will not adversely affect the wages and working conditions of similarly employed U.S. workers. About 30 to 50% of those employment-based visas go to this category. The third preference is for professionals, skilled workers, and other workers, a different class. I won't go into all the details, but about 25%, this also requires labor certification. 25% of those visas go to these immigrants. The fourth is a smaller category. 5% annually go to, for lack of a better term, special immigrants. This is a range of different types of people: religious workers, employees of U.S. Foreign Service posts, retired employees of international organizations, and so forth. No labor certification needed there. The last employment-based visa, the EB5, the so-called investor visa, is the one that looks the most like this proposal in the Startup Act. And this is a visa that's reserved for business investors who invest $1 million or $500,000 if the investment is made in a targeted employment area. They have to invest in a new commercial enterprise that employs at least 10 full-time U.S. workers. It's about 1 to 2% annually. We've never reached the cap on these visas, although there's a lot of renewed interest in this since the Great Recession set in, and especially in the last year or so. So the impulse for the provision in the Startup Act seems right because entrepreneurs create jobs, according to a 2010 Kauffman Foundation report. Until the recession, new firms added an average of 3 million jobs in their first year, while older companies lost about 1 million jobs annually. Entrepreneurs create jobs, but unfortunately, shrinking job creation in startups is contributing to a slowdown of job creation. So new companies are job creators. Immigrants also have higher rates of entrepreneurship. Immigrants were more than twice as likely as the native-born to start businesses in each month last year. And of all naturalized citizens, over 5% were employed in their own incorporated businesses, compared with only 3.7% of employed native-born citizens. And so it's clear that there are differences among the foreign-born and the native-born in that sense. Immigrants have a great track record. We have a lot of success stories. We've talked about quite a few in the contemporary moment, like Andy Grove. Lots of history of immigrants creating jobs in this country and creating jobs. Andrew Carnegie, Alexander Graham Bell, Levi Strauss, a long time ago. More recently, there are other examples. In a report by the Partnership for a New American Economy, they reported that over time, more than 40% of Fortune 500 companies were founded by immigrants or by their children, and 25% of high-tech startups in the U.S. had at least one immigrant founder, and those companies have created about 450,000 jobs. I think Paula already mentioned that. More recently, there was an interesting article in the New York Times that profiled immigrant entrepreneurs who barely could speak English, who were doing very well in this country. In particular, there were profiles of a tortilla maker and a cell phone maker. So it's not just the high-tech piece, but other things as well. And third, that urge is strong because in the global race for talent, the talented have choices. And these worldwide options have increased over time. Skilled immigrants have more choices on where to go and maybe fewer choices to stay in the United States because of the economy here. There's some evidence that Chinese and Indians in the United States and perhaps others are returning home due to growing demand in their countries, better career options there, better networks and financial compensation. And other emerging markets are starting to draw on this group of workers like Brazil and China and Russia, some African countries. And other countries have more competitive programs to attract entrepreneurs. Canada, the UK has one, and Chile has just started a startup program as well. However, the urge to spur on new businesses through visas has risks and obstacles as well. And starting a business is risky, especially in the current economic climate. The Kauffman Foundation again found that the overall trend in business survival was relatively stable prior to the Great Recession, with roughly 45 to 50% of new businesses surviving 5 years. But recent business births are showing lower survival rates, and compared to about, whether it's measured in a 2-year increment or 5-year increments, recent cohorts of new businesses have been hard hit by the downturn. So we see opportunity and the chance for growth reduced a little bit now as well. And then there are also barriers and obstacles that come with being an immigrant starting a business in this country that come with the kinds of programs that we already offer. And we can learn some things from the EB-5 investor visa that have affected the success of that program and the success of immigrants in obtaining green cards, which is one of the goals that they have. And I'll just run through a few of these. The number of EB-5 investors, as I've mentioned, has been very low since the program started 20 years ago. We've never even filled half the cap of 10,000 visas per year. But it has been rising recently, and I'm sure we will see a much closer number to the cap in coming years. This low participation is due to the rigorous application process and also the uncertainty of meeting the requirements, which are not always as transparent as users would like them to be. Regulations to adjudicate the applications were not administered and implemented in a timely way when this program first started, which gave the program a bad reputation, along with some fraud, which also gave it a bad reputation. So there are a lot of things that program, just in terms of the mechanics of it, soured interest in it. So one question is, well, will entrepreneur investors be cautious based on those kinds of issues that we've seen with other programs? The DHS has offered some new procedures to streamline the application and review process. That they promise that the intake will be faster, the adjudication will be faster, and I do think we will see more applications this year. It's still a question of whether the success will be seen. There are a bunch of issues around just the how well the system can handle an influx of new applications, and if, in fact, there are 75,000 visas available. I'm sure some of them are for family members, some would be designated for the entrepreneurs themselves. But the question is, can the system handle such an intake in terms of tens of thousands of applications, and how quickly will they have to staff up, and how well will they be able to do it? Will they be able to train people fast enough? So we do need an infusion of jobs. There is a question about the timing and implementation of such a program. There are backlogs that could be reduced by using the STEM mechanism as well, and maybe somehow bringing these two programs together. It's unclear. People like to hire within their networks, and how these two programs would actually function together. Could I, as an entrepreneur, hire my buddies from my graduate program in a STEM field? I mean, I'm not sure all of these things have been laid out yet. And I think it's important that some of the barriers that we've seen in the past be mitigated, so that this could be a successful program, because we don't need another failed program that targets entrepreneurs in this country. And I think part of that is it has to be more than just a visa strategy. It has to be more than the visa being the end goal. How do we create an environment that makes people want to use this mechanism to start a business, which includes all of the things that I just mentioned. So finally, it's difficult to evaluate this proposal from my perspective, because it's hard to evaluate what has been successful in related programs in the past. For example, we don't have good estimates of how many H-1Bs actually are in the country, how long they stay here, what their success rates are for adjusting to a green card, what their pathways are like. It would be really interesting and important to know how that works for STEM and other fields. How many leave the country? Where do they go? What do they do when they leave? We also don't have a good evaluation of the EB-5 investor visa program. There's a lot of murkiness there, and it's very unclear. There's no data really to evaluate the success of that program, and I could talk more about that if we want. So I will end there, and we can talk later.
Thank you, Audrey, very much. I think you've clarified our thinking by pointing out how murky it can be. Well, let me turn to Toby Smith. Toby is going to talk, I've asked him to talk about the accelerating commercialization from universities piece. And as you know, that's been a preoccupation here in the United States for some time. Really in the 1980s, saw a whole series of legislative steps that were an attempt to facilitate commercialization both by universities and by national laboratories. And the Startup Act intends to take another step in that direction. And Toby, from the perspective of Tier 1 research universities, what comments would you make, and what suggestions would you make?
Sure. Well, first, I want to thank Kent for inviting me. I've actually been spending a lot of time looking at not only the Startup Act, but this whole issue of technology commercialization. How do we get the ideas from our research universities out, not only in the marketplace, but out so they benefit society? So this is a major issue, illustrated by the fact just 2 weeks ago at our AAU President's meeting, this was one of the topics on their agenda. We had Mark Wrighton, who chaired a National Research Council report on managing university intellectual property in the public interest. He's the chancellor at Washington University in St. Louis there. We had the director of the Tech Transfer Office from Stanford. Of course, Stanford is often looked at the place who knows how to do this. And then the director of the Patent and Trademark Office. So it was a productive discussion, and I think it's been something that has been very much at all levels of the university on people's minds, and here in Washington, which is one of the reasons I think it's been picked up as a topic and is highlighted in Section 7 of the bill. Before I talk about Section 7, I should say there are, from a university's perspective, the immigration, moving that high-skilled immigration piece is something that's very important to us. I'd also like to say on the regulatory front, I think we also appreciate the attempt to reduce the regulations. We have been making our own case that as it relates to research, there's a number of regulations that get in the way, and one that's particularly drawing some attention these days is how we monitor both potential conflicts of interest, but also promote the types of relationships that we want to actually spur innovation. So I applaud, I think, the legislation for taking on those two important issues. As it relates to tech transfer, let me give you a little, what I want to do is talk generally about some observations generally, and maybe even convey some of what the presidents discussed at their meeting in terms of their views on this, and then get into specific details about some of the provisions in the bill. So I think when you talk to university presidents about tech transfer and technology commercialization, the first thing they often want to make clear is that tech transfer is really only a small piece of how we at universities get the knowledge that is generated there out into the marketplace. In fact, when I worked at MIT, Chuck Vest, who was then president and now heads the National Academies of Engineering, said our number one means of tech transfer is ultimately the students that we train. And I think we all need to remember that, because sometimes there has been this huge emphasis on the tech transfer office and are they doing it, and but at the end of the day, it's the training that students, and a lot of the startups are started by students. That's the people who go out, and they're also the ones who industry. If you look, there's even a good MIT study. A lot of times industry, in terms of forming partnerships with the universities, is less interested in IP. In fact, that's at the bottom of their list, according to this MIT study. What is at the top of their list is getting students that are well-trained. And this is an area where we need to just remember that the primary missions of universities are education and research. And then we need to do a better job, though, and readily admit there are things that can be done to improve the way in which we get IP out into the marketplace. So I think sometimes we overemphasize the importance of tech transfer. I'd also say that we also need to remember not only students are a way of transferring things, but for a long time we've had a system of science that's based upon openness. So a lot of the research is published in scientific journals that are accessible. A lot of times companies will actually access that, and the fact that we've really kept science open is another characteristic, I think, of the U.S. system that has made us, our system of research, really one that is envied. Now, as it relates to tech transfer itself, Kent mentioned, legislation that was passed in the 80s. The big act was the Bayh-Dole Act, which allowed universities to maintain intellectual property based upon ideas generated with federal funding. And in some sense, I would argue that really incentivized major changes. Basically, universities now had a reason to, and were motivated to go out and actually take and commercialize technologies, whereas before the federal government would maintain the intellectual property, and a lot of things just sat on the shelf. So if you look at the trends in terms of patents, licenses, it has been growing on a constant pace ever since the Bayh-Dole Act, and I think you can find general agreement, at least within the university community, that that act has been effective. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't improvements that we can make in the way technology transfer offices at our campuses work. I would say the whole process has been an evolutionary process. It started with a lot of tech transfer offices being run by lawyers their job was really to negotiate deals, although they were more focused on crossing the I's and dotting the T's of the licensing agreements. There also was a question of how you fund these entities. So there were certain universities like MIT and Stanford that had a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship within the faculty, and they moved very quickly, and they also had some success in this area. Although, hearing Kathy Koo, it took several years even for Stanford's tech transfer office to break even. So one of the other issues was how to fund these things. So I think there was an overemphasis in the early days, because some of the tech transfer offices were actually told, the way you make the money is to actually earn it, and you've got to make the revenues. And the problem is that put, I think, an overemphasis on revenue generation, where the real objective of tech transfer at universities should be getting these things out in the marketplace. And if you talk again to somebody like Kathy Koo at Stanford, or John Hennessy will often make the case, the president there, that they've gotten more revenues back from the things that they didn't license to the university than they have from the things they did. They've had a few blockbusters, but it's only been a few. It hasn't been, and a majority of the things that they license, they don't make any money off of. But the ones, that they didn't license, Google, for example, they turned the license over to the Google boys, and they thought it was just another search engine at the time. Now, what they'll say, though, and the same with Hewlett-Packard, where they didn't get any IP, is that in the end, the gifts that they've gotten back from those, from being supportive and promoting an environment that supports entrepreneurship have been significant. And I think President Hennessy is one of the biggest advocates for saying that we shouldn't be in the business of tech transfer for making money. That's the wrong reason to be doing this. And so there was actually a very good report done by the National Academies, the one that Mark Wrighton chaired, that really emphasized that. It also said that universities, perhaps its biggest recommendation was that universities should, at the highest level, establish some goals for what their tech transfer operations should be about. And this has often been one of the problems with tech transfer at universities, is that offices, in my view, have gotten mixed messages. Is it about making money? How do you actually judge success? Now, like I say, it's been an evolutionary process. I think what tech transfer offices have learned is that they have to get people from business involved. They have to bring people who understand not just the legalese of doing the deal, but actually are willing to take risks and also able to assess the potential value of the technologies they have. But at the highest level, it's really important, as the National Academies report suggested, that we do have policies in place that guide what the objectives are when it comes to tech transfer, and those should be endorsed at the highest level of the university by the regents, by the presidents. I think I worry sometimes with state cuts. Now you see governors and sometimes even Board of Regents seeing and state legislatures seeing tech transfer as the way to make up revenues lost, and it's just not going to happen. So I think that is something we need to continue to make sure doesn't dominate tech transfer. So let me talk a little bit then about some of the specific pieces in Section 7 of the bill about which we have both and then we've had a few concerns about Section 7, which is that piece of the legislation that focuses on improving university commercialization. By far, probably the thing that's gotten the most attention in the bill, so the bill creates two new grants programs, one that would essentially try to accelerate technology commercialization on university campuses, and I think generally the premise of that we like. We have a little bit of a concern with the funding mechanism, which I'll explain in a second. There is also a section that would promote collaboration. It's called commercialization collaboration grants. And I think the thing that has sparked the most controversy in the bill is that section because it promotes an idea that was first came out actually and has been promoted by the Kauffman Foundation, that suggests that faculty should be allowed to be free agents when it comes to technology commercialization. They shouldn't be bound to utilize their own university's technology transfer office as the mechanism to commercialize an idea that they have. So if they wanted to, they could go to an outside university somewhere else, or they could go to an outside entity and they could commercialize the technology. Now, the problem with this, from our perspective, and what the legislation is a little bit, it actually promotes grants to allow universities support when they agree that they will collaborate with another university to allow faculty to then utilize the services of the technology transfer office. The problems we see with this are several. First of all, the free agency notion itself assumes that faculty are interested in and want commercialization. And the reality on many of our campuses is, while we'd like to have a bunch of faculty entrepreneurs, many of them are much more interested in their research. And what we're really engaged in right now is an effort to try and transform that culture, to get them to think about, could their idea be transformed? Could it be commercialized? So in some sense, I don't think it helps. And the Tech Transfer Office has actually been at the cutting edge oftentimes of leading that charge on our campuses to really pull faculty into more entrepreneurial activities and trying to get them active in terms of thinking about whether their idea could be commercialized. So that would be the first thing I'd say about the free agency notion. Second thing I'd say is, in some sense, remember the universities maintain the intellectual property. So this would create tremendous challenges from the university's perspective if the faculty members then were allowed to go utilize somebody else's technology transfer office to commercialize an idea that they had, because the intellectual property will still reside with the employer, the university at which that faculty member works, and then they would have to go to another university, and there'd have to be some revenue sharing agreement, because what's the incentive for somebody else to actually commercialize the technology if there isn't some revenue involved? So it gets very complicated very quickly. That raises, and this was something that National Academy actually looked at and mentioned with regards to free agency, is once you get those, you already have sometimes joint research teams across different campuses, so you have more than one inventor. They're not always at the same university. What if one inventor wants to go to one place to commercialize, the other wants to go somewhere else? You get into this very complicated mix that's going to generate several problems related to conflict of interest. Also issues related to public accountability. I mean, if the faculty member is really in charge of commercializing the invention, not the university for which the faculty member works, you can see where there might, there'll probably be more of an incentive to try and maximize revenue. Oftentimes faculty are not all that familiar with how oftentimes they get it wrong. And this is where I think we are seeing on campuses the importance of mentors, bringing outside folks from businesses to actually help faculty, to guide them to better understand what their idea, where the market actually exists. So one thing we've been promoting at AAU is the notion that where we really need help is support for early stage proof of concept funding. That free agency is not really the solution, but that, again, the tech transfer offices have been struggling oftentimes for lack of funding, for lack of also the expertise to actually focus on how to test the market feasibility of certain products, whether there's actually, how to. So we've been promoting this idea of proof of concept funds. Now, that's one place where I think the legislation does get it right, and it really does support that. We are a little bit concerned because it would, to fund this other grants program, the Innovation Acceleration Grant, it would take 0.15% of the funds from all existing research agencies that receive over $100 million in funding, transfer that money to the Department of Commerce into these various grants programs. We would rather see, at a time when the research agencies are really starting to move to look at how they not only focus on basic research, but how they start to support some of this later stage efforts. You have the NIH now with its National Center for Translational Research that is creating. You have NSF creating programs like the I-Corps program, which is really trying to, again, get to this issue of how do we promote a culture, how do we encourage those faculty who have ideas to take it to that next level, to go somewhere, to think about an actual startup. We would hate to see that money leave at the very time we're seeing a transformation, these agencies starting to think about these things and be transferred to the Department of Commerce for this new grants program. We would rather see it stay in those agencies to support those new type of proof of concept programs, these entrepreneurship programs within the agency itself. The last thing I'd say about the bill is it creates a new, kind of to oversee these grants programs, it creates a new oversight committee or advisory committee, and that group will be chaired by the director of the National Science Foundation. We have suggested that it would be much more sensible. Under this administration, Secretary Locke created an advisory committee called the National Council of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. It actually looks a lot like the council that's created in the bill. It consists of a third university representatives, including some of our presidents. One of the co-chairs is Mary Sue Coleman from the University of Michigan. Then industry representation. I think Steve Case is actually a member of that group. And then entrepreneurs like Desh Deshpande, who runs the Deshpande Center at MIT. So it's kind of broken up. We feel that committee could do what is called for in the legislation, we might as well just use that, and that would be as effective to oversee these new programs. So overall, I think there's some real positive things. We're hopeful that we can see, particularly I think the biggest concern is the issue of free agency, which I'm happy to answer additional questions from our university's perspective about the legislation.
Toby, thank you very much. Thank you all. Let me, I always have a pocket full of questions, and I'm going to leave them in my pocket and turn immediately to our educated and engaged audience. Who would like to have the first question? Gentleman there and Mitzi.
Hi, Tom Donlan from Barron's Magazine. It seemed to me that there were, to build on what Mr. Smith said at the end, that there is already a plethora, an almost unnavigable plethora, as Ms. Singer suggested, of programs to promote entrepreneurship, to promote bringing or keeping the best people. So I would ask, is there any particular program that any of you would identify, program or even provision of law that any of you would identify as really, really deserving to be repealed, and that we could get a big bang for the buck if we just stopped doing something we're already doing?
Toby, and neither of you seems to be directed at you. Paula seems to be left off the hook momentarily.
I'm trying to think which one I want to highlight, because you asked for only one. So to that end, I mean, we actually, from the university's perspective, I co-authored a paper that appeared in Issues in Science and Technology that actually laid out about 10 different regulatory issues that we felt could be addressed. One that is an area which I think everybody agrees really does need some examination. The administration has tried to take this on, but it is always a challenging. Relates to export controls, and I think we really do need to think about what's on some of the lists, how it applies. We get into it at universities because of deemed exports, where if students are from foreign countries, it creates all sorts of issues. So long as they're working on, basic research is okay, but when it gets into other areas, it gets very complicated very quickly. So, I mean, that's just one example. I think there are a lot of other areas where we would also see some changes that could be made.
I would, I'm going to sidestep that, but address the issue that you raised first. There are not a plethora of pathways in for graduate STEM students who are foreign-born to stay here permanently, and there aren't visa mechanisms to bring in fresh entrepreneurial ventures in the way that this bill proposes. So, there is an issue. We used to be concerned in this country with brain drain from developing countries as they were taking off and people were finding opportunities elsewhere, leaving their home country. We were concerned with getting them to go back to help those countries. Now we have the opposite concern because economic circumstances have changed, and we're worried about losing those same people to their home countries or to other places. So this is a way to kind of capture some of that energy, vitality, and brain power that this large group of contributors could potentially contribute longer term in this country.
Introduce yourself again.
I will. I'm Mitzi Worth. I'm with the Naval Postgraduate School. I think I'm a little puzzled by this proposed law. If they don't get something going, an entrepreneurial effort going, we then send them home. And I guess the question is, if they get something going and it doesn't work, do we send them home? Seems to me we just want to have smart people here. And they don't necessarily have to be an entrepreneur, but they could be doing research somewhere else, or they could be teaching. I mean, strikes me as it's sort of a little cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Right. Well, that's why there are the two provisions. One is for STEM workers to remain if they work in the STEM field for 5 years following graduation. The second is for the entrepreneurs, and there is a lot of risk there. And they may follow other pathways to hedge that risk during the time that they're starting businesses, but they may just, when we look at startup success rates, there's definitely a lot of risk associated with them returning home.
I think the senators would say that they might have more expansive proposals in the future, but that they're creating 2 new doors. So they're expanding the opportunities.
And I think the other thing is they're not necessarily bringing in newcomers. They're saying we have a really good stock of people here who could do these things. If they're willing to take the risk, we'll take the risk with them. Otherwise, they'd have to return home or find another way to remain in the U.S. for an extended period. So maybe that's the logic. I'm not sure.
Oh, I wanted to ask, please, David.
Thank you, David Payton, Vermeer Corporation. Let me start with an observation before asking the question. A really astonishing thing happened with the capital formation bill that we call the jobs bill. It wasn't really an accurate title, but seemed to help it get passed, which is that without looking and before you knew it, we had a huge majorities in both parties in favor of a piece of legislation that had some real substantive effect. So how could we ever get the same kind of thing happening here with these various provisions that are mostly related to talent as opposed to capital formation? How can we start to build the huge agreement that we saw with the capital formation bill? Any ideas?
I think one of the ways to do it is to do exactly what they did in the jobs bill, which is to focus on the job creation aspect of it. Particularly with respect to talent, the issue quickly devolves into one of immigration discussions, and you have your silos of people who have very strong feelings about immigration, and politically that creates problems. The more focus that can be placed on the economic benefits and the innovation benefits that this country will receive as a result of that, and sort of continue to reframe the debate in that way, I think it helps. Having said that, though, it's still immigration. It's still going to be problematic. We just need to keep focusing on the positive aspects of this discussion. I also think it's important to talk about this immigration in sort of the permanent way that the bill suggests, which is that there's been a lot of negativity around the H-1B visa program over the years, and I think what we're talking about here, and what most of the high-tech companies, at least I know in my industry, and I know in some others as well, we're not looking to get temporary workers here to come and do a job that will eventually, that they'll eventually go back for. What we're looking for is to tap the talent that's coming out of U.S. universities to do what we've always done, which is to hire from U.S. universities. We're not looking to hire that talent on a temporary basis. We're looking to hire it on a permanent basis. We want these people to become naturalized citizens, ultimately, if they choose to do that, because we think they have a lot to offer. And I think a lot of focus, there's not as much focus on that as there should be. And I think that one of the reasons why I like this bill so much is that it actually focuses on, that particular piece of immigration, that the folks coming out of U.S. universities with STEM degrees.
Mr. Intangible.
That's getting old, Ken. Ken Jarbo, Athena Alliance. And this is a question to Toby, and it goes beyond really the bill, but more what the university presidents are talking about in terms of tech transfer. One of the things that always worries me or bothers me about the tech transfer arguments is it's phrased in a technological deterministic way. It's, I've invented a new gadget, and if I can just get it out to the public, they'll obviously see that it's the greatest thing since, to use the old cliche, sliced bread. Whereas in a lot of cases, what the entrepreneurs need is a reach into the university. They need to find out where the best piece of their puzzle lies. They're trying to do something, they're pulling technologies together, they're pulling business methods together, and they have trouble reaching into the university. Now, we dealt with this a number of years ago at the National Labs unsuccessfully. But are the university presidents talking about programs that would help entrepreneurs reach in? Things like clearinghouses that talk about the expertise of faculty members and the research projects and all of those various things to make the connection to the entrepreneurs as opposed to try to force feed them.
I think the answer is absolutely. There's huge issues of the first is how to attract VCs, and this was a discussion we had with a group of university presidents and venture capitalists back in December that was organized. AAU co-sponsored an event with the National Council of Technology Transfer, and it was very interesting because the VCs were trying to talking about how to attract them. That's something universities are particularly looking at. I heard we actually had Bill Joy come and talk to our senior research officers this year, and it was fascinating just how he explained to them what he's now representing. Of course, he was one of the founders of Sun Microsystems. Now he's with Kleiner Perkins, explaining what he comes to a campus and is really looking for. That it's not the knowledge he has, the knowledge the company has, going in and trying to not just pick the thing that's going to move the dial a little bit, but really transformational technologies that they want to make investments in. So there's huge interest, and that was driven, I can tell you, by the senior research officers who wanted to hear from a VC because they're trying to figure out how to do exactly that and attract these people to their campuses. Because they know that that's the way really to move things out more effectively.
Well, does TI have some experience of trying to access talent in the university or get a sense of where research is going and perhaps convey to the research community the particular challenges, intellectual challenges that TI is facing?
Yes, so the semiconductor industry as a general rule is very research intensive anyway. About 13% of our revenues get plowed back into R&D on an annual basis. For TI, it may be a little higher for the industry writ large. And a lot of that is sort of the more commercialization side of the piece. So our R&D folks are working regularly with the university, and the industry itself has a long history of collaborative research with universities going back to when Semitech was set up in the late 90s. Where, partially in response to the Japanese trade threat, the need to become more competitive, the industry got over, it took a little while for it to do it, but it got over its competitive nature and its ability to sit down in the same room with each other to work on pre-competitive research. And Semitech was a great success in getting the industry more competitive, working with our equipment manufacturers, but also in establishing the base for continued collaborative research, and we continue to do that through a number of different programs where we're looking at how to extend the benefits of the current technology we have, CMOS, till it runs out and reaches its physical limits, and to find what the next technology is going to be to help ensure that the semiconductor industry continues to get faster and better products and really push the edge of the envelope. So we have people that are at universities all the time, and we've worked out relationships to help pass information back and forth as needed, and we utilize them, as I said earlier, and that Toby mentioned as well, as a source of talent. That we work very closely with the grad students in various universities, whether it's in our own backyard at University of Texas at Dallas and SMU, or at UT Arlington, or whether it's at MIT, Stanford, whatever. We've got folks all over the place. We want to hire those students when they get done because they've been working on these issues. They understand, they've got breadth and depth, and It may not be so much because of what they've invented or thought about, but because they know how to work within those confines. So.
Mike Waring with the University of Michigan. I want to build on Ken's question a little bit because I think it speaks to a broader issue, which is what is the role of the government in trying to deal with these issues, and what are the limitations on what government can do to help this? I mean, every member of Congress, I think, if you asked him or her, would say that they think job creation is the #1 goal. We need to create more jobs, and that's great. It's hard to figure out legislatively necessarily how you're going to come up with a plan to do that because the economy is a huge multi-trillion-dollar animal, and government can affect it in some ways. So within your scope of what you look at this bill, what are the things that the government can do, but what are the things that the government maybe really can't achieve that are going to be required that companies need to do, or that universities need to do, or that the economy itself needs to kind of work through to kind of bring this back into a better situation? I guess I'm trying to get a sense of what is it we want. If we were going to pass a bill like this, are there things in here that will really help? Are there other things that would be more helpful, or are there things that outside players besides government need to do in order to help make this process work forward?
So is that to me? I'll just start off, and others can jump in. I think this bill has a lot of good pieces to that frame it. I think from a broader industry perspective, what's going to create jobs in the U.S., at least speaking on behalf of a semiconductor company, that it's developing the ecosystem to enable the United States to be the most competitive and to have the best ideas here. And that involves different things that government can do. So one is fixing the immigration system, right? We've been talking about this for 15 years, and we get these incremental fixes along the way, and I mentioned one of them, but let's just fix it and recognize the fact that we've got great universities that are turning out great students, and we want the folks who come from overseas to study there to remain with us. So that's one thing. Second is ensuring that the best ideas are here, right? The best ideas are what you, Mike, do, and Toby, the research institutions make sure that they're adequately funded in basic research and other research projects, so that the best ideas are coming out of here, and that they can spawn new things, and we can develop new companies coming out of that. And the third is making a competitive environment here. So tax policy. The United States is hugely non-competitive when it comes to tax policy. We have the highest tax rate in the entire world. We have a system that is unlike most of the others. It's a worldwide system where basically U.S. companies get double tax if they bring back their earnings overseas. We have an R&D credit that keeps expiring, that no one can count on, helping to ensure that there is a good, solid environment for wanting to make the investments in the United States, to making this an attractive place to invest, also creates jobs here. So you put all these three things together, you create an ecosystem rather than just one thing, an ecosystem that's going to make the country much more competitive and will drive jobs.
Paul, I want to just follow that up with the Semitech example. Would it be useful for the government, not in a crisis mode, but say, invite Industry X in and say, are there areas where you might collaborate? So there'd be an initial antitrust exemption, the government called them in, and see if there were pre-competitive areas.
So I think that they're doing that, and actually they're looking at our industry as an example of that. So, for example, there's a program called the Nanoelectronics Research Initiative, which is funded by businesses. Companies are putting money in. It's funded by NSF. It's funded by NIST. And it's funded by various states. New York has money in, Texas, Indiana, and California. And they are all focused on sort of the next logic switch for the industry. And there's all sorts of virtual collaborations that are going on, or virtual centers that are focusing on specific issues. And because of that collaboration, folks within the government are saying this is actually we learned how to play in the sandbox together. A lot of other sectors probably haven't learned that because it's hard at first. People don't want to share information. They're very proprietary, and you have to keep reminding people this is pre-competitive. This is going to make us all more competitive in the end. And so there is work that's being done, and I think that there's government. If you talk to the folks at NIST, they're very interested in having more of these types of programs.
Toby, I'm sorry.
Well,
We'll go to the
to Mike's point, I wanted to say first from the university's perspective, it's important, and we don't always make this clear, but we're not we don't directly create jobs. We indirectly create jobs through doing research and educating students, and then the outcome is then the ability to have these ideas that you can take and hopefully get somebody else to commercialize it. Some of my tech transfer friends would say, we don't even commercialize things. We find the people who will take and commercialize things. So the whole notion of university commercialization is kind of a misnomer. That then gets to another point, which I think from a government perspective, you have to think of the university holistically. And honestly, I worry sometimes with particularly the degree to which states are cutting back support for public higher education. And that it is that front end of the ecosystem which our universities represent, the fact that we've created a lot of smart people who create a lot of smart ideas. Certainly we can focus on how to better get those out. But if we lose that front end of the pipeline because we're not supporting it adequately, or we're thinking it's all about a private good, and I worry sometimes that particularly state legislatures aren't looking at public higher education as a public good. They think of it as something, it helps you, you pay, that we're all going to be in trouble. So I'd say that's a starting point. I think from the federal government's perspective, like I say, there's some programs out there, and the agencies are starting to move there to try and get a little bit away from just supporting the basic research and some of the things that help our universities and help the faculty to take their ideas from the lab into the marketplace, and we want to promote those kind of programs.
Let's make this the last question. I promised to try to get everyone out by 11. I've already violated that standard, and I know one or two of our panelists need to be either back in the office or back on a train out of town. Please, sir.
My name is Fred Stahl. I'm an author, formerly with MIT, spent most of my career at Boeing. It seems to me that there's more needed here than just more smart people with more innovative ideas, particularly with advanced degrees in STEM. There are some, I think, well-known examples now of course, TI being one of the pioneers in microprocessors and microchips, now are manufactured mostly overseas. The United States was the source of decisive technology for solar panels. We can't produce them anymore. The Chinese are producing them. And there are other areas that we are failed to bring into production. So it seems to me that there's a problem in bringing things into a competitive production mode that is globally competitive. Any responses?
I'd just like to respond to, if I think I understood you correctly, the U.S. semiconductor industry still manufactures most of the chips here in the U.S. TI has, at the end of this year, we'll have 11 factories, and 6 of them are in the U.S., and most of the others are in those low-tax regions like Japan and Germany, right? So it's not, so we're still very much in the manufacturing space there. So I did want to just mention that.
I just say, I mean, I agree in the sense that we have to maintain the manufacturing base. We have to build it in areas. I think you heard the senators talk a little bit about maybe some ideas and how they might do that, and certainly looking at tax incentives and other repatriation. I mean, those are things that we need to have a serious discussion about as how do we do that? Because the last thing we want to do is, again, this gets to the whole issue of talent, is have talent leaving the U.S. That we trained here. So we need lots of smart people, but we also want to have, again, the infrastructure and the capacity to take advantage of the fact that we have and will continue to train those people here.
Just pick up on Paula's ecosystem comment that many other countries, many of our major competitors, including what people refer to as the emerging market countries, really have national economic and or manufacturing strategies. We, by and large, have not had that approach here. In many ways, at least some commentators would say that we built a trading system after World War II, which has worked very well for almost everyone involved, but we built on a set of assumptions in which there was going to be relatively little government involvement in the economy and much more private sector. That set of assumptions now faces what you might call the East Asian miracle strategy of growth, in which there is a good deal of government involvement in the economy. Sometimes they're state-owned enterprises. In the case of Japan, it was an extensive and ongoing dialogue between the government and the private sector, including some guidance. Often that successful East Asian miracle approach is involved in let's say, an aggressive borrowing of intellectual property without proper compensation. Sometimes import barriers, often export subsidies. So this has been very successful in the East Asian context, but it runs against the underlying assumptions on which we have operated. The Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations may be a major attempt, perhaps the last attempt, to try to create a new set of rules under which everyone will operate. But lacking that, I think some would say, and I've done thinking along this line myself, that we may have to change the way we operate and be more thoughtful about focusing on the importance of an ecosystem and thinking of universities as a public good. As Audrey pointed out, we don't have that many avenues for that intellectual talent, that STEM talent, really to come and to stay. Well, this has been a terrific discussion. I thank you all for coming. I thank you for your very useful questions. I want to thank an outstanding panel. I've sit here taking notes. It's been a real education for me. And I would ask you all to please join in a round of applause.